Hello and welcome to the next tutorial series. So we're going to talk about the Moog Grandmother. Partially selfish reasons because I don't think there's a film score that I've not used this on since I bought it. Even orchestral stuff, it's like, plugging along in the back there. I think part of it is that, our perception of film score orchestra is pretty synth reinforced. So I use this to reinforce bass. I use it to kind of ride along under melodies. And then I use it in electronic scores because it's capable of so many things. And partially the selfish reasons here is, there's so much that this can do, and I sort of need to get even more into it. So we're going to go way into the weeds together, I think, in terms of like other ways to wire this. So we're going to go over the normal patch. And this is, we'll eventually talk about the sequencer and the arpeggiator and all that stuff. So this is sort of modern take on the mini Moog in a way. It's two oscillators, but the modulation oscillator can become a third oscillator if you replace noise. The big thing this is missing from the mini Moog is that it has one envelope instead of two. So, filter and amplitude are running together unless you wire up your own outside envelope. So, let's talk from the beginning. Sound starts with the oscillators. So we've got our choice of waveforms here. We've got two oscillators, so we can have, triangle through pulse for each one. We have a hard sync that we'll talk about later. We have octave controls. We have a mixer section with two oscillators and noise, and all of these can be shorted and replaced with something else. We've got a high pass and an attenuverter, and these are not wired. So if you want access to these, you have to physically plug in a wire. We have our filter, just normal ladder filter. And I use this a lot, in the lower settings to reinforce basses. If we're talking about orchestral settings, we have an envelope that's linked to both the filter and amplitude, so we can control how much of the envelope is affecting the filter with this knob. We've got normal resonance, attack, decay, release, sustain. What I find is the sustain is the only thing on mine that is not extremely solid. All these other knobs are extremely solid feeling. So let me know if your sustain is really loose. Mine feels really loose. And then we've got a real spring reverb. If I shake it, we get a nice spring sound. And then we've got several different VCA modes. We can follow the envelope, we can work off of keyboard release, or we can drone. So, some nice things. This mixer section, if you go all the way to the top, this distorts. This is actual distortion. It's like around 1, 2 o'clock is sort of unity gain, and then anything past that is distortion. And it's awesome. The way the modulation oscillator is hardwired is we've got pitch, cutoff, and pulse width set here, and they are linked to the mod wheel. So if we set for pulse width modulation, and then we go and actually use pulses. So we've got a square wave on oscillator 1 and a pulse on oscillator 2. And as we turn up the mod knob, back the distortion down so you can hear it better. An interesting thing you'll find is that this can actually go all the way to nothing. So you can use this to make rhythms. So you can hear that this pulse wave is modulating almost to no audio. We can actually make that happen. Here's our rate knob for how fast we're changing sound over time. So that's a really nice use for it. We can modulate the cutoff of the filter. And we have some choices of waveform. So here we have a square wave, more rhythmic, ramp, pulse. Oh, not a pulse. This is a sawtooth, so it gets a little bit of a... It sounds like more like a pulse to me. It's less up and down than the square. And we've got the sine wave, so it was. Okay, some other things to note. The filter can self-oscillate. So we'll experiment with taking the output of the filter and replacing one of the oscillators, and we'll get it to make notes instead of filter sounds. And that's really about it for the overview. So it does kind of work left to right in a way, the only exception being the modulation section, which kind of comes in at different points depending on how you've chosen this, and the arpeggiator and the sequencer section, it's kind of up front. We would have to set it up. And you see, we can do even a little bit of a Buchla trick where you've got sort of different rates of things happening and creating some interest through rhythmic displacement between a modulation and the actual amplitude of a note. But we'll get more into that. So I hope this gives you a good overview, and we'll go from here.